Welcome back. That was a great networking session. As part of our second group, let's please welcome Kim Hale, Senior Director of Business Partnerships from Within3, co-presenting with Jing Chen, Global Market Development and Program Manager at Medtronic, which will be speaking on engaging key stakeholders via compliance virtual technology. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Jing and I appreciate the time this morning to be able to meet with all of you. And we hope that we're going to be able to provide you some information today that's going to be beneficial as you move forward and start taking a look at long-term fixes to the virtual engagement platforms that we've all been using over this past year. So again, we appreciate your time and please, we look forward to speaking with you later on in the day as well today. So again, I'd like to introduce my co-presenter, Jing Chen, who is the Global Market Development Manager from Medtronic, based out of Boulder, Colorado. And again, my name is Kim Hale, Vice President, Team Lead of Business Development for Medical Device at Within3. And again, we're very happy to be here and be a part of your day today. So what I would like to talk with you about today and just talk with you and about with you what you're currently using for real-time to engagements, any time of virtual engagement that you're currently using to engage your customers, to engage your reps in the field, to engage your KOLs and your HCPs. Now, back in 2019, we all had the capability. Remember those days when we actually could meet face-to-face? We could actually sit down and we could talk with somebody. We could look at body language. We could answer questions. We could sit and eat lunch with people, which was absolutely amazing. And so that was what I call a real-time engagement on a face-to-face basis. And I hope that we're all going to get back there. Hopefully within the next year, we'll be back and being able to meet with people in conference rooms and in their offices. But in 2020, things suddenly changed. And suddenly we had to become real-time with virtual engagement. And what was that going to be? A lot of us knew a little bit about what virtual engagement was, and some of us knew nothing about it. And so being able now to continue to reach out to our customers, to reach out to our physicians and clinicians in the field became very, very interesting. And we developed a lot of Band-Aids, a lot of quick things to be able to have those webcasts and webinars and web meetings. And we used all sorts of ways of doing it, all the way from FaceTime to Zoom calls to WebEx, GoToMeeting, whatever it might be. And they worked pretty well, but they came with their own set of issues. Now, you probably all have been on a Zoom call or a WebEx or whatever, a Teams meeting, whatever it might be, and you've heard dogs barking in the background, you've heard horns honking, people ringing the doorbell, babies crying. The other day I was on a call with an individual from Australia, and he had a cat that kept popping up over his shoulder. And eventually the cat jumped off his shoulder, landed on his keyboard, and completely canceled him out of the meeting. And he was the CEO of the company. So rather interesting, the issues we deal with in real-time virtual engagement. So as we look to kind of take the Band-Aids off that we had in 2020 and see how we're going to move forward in 2021 and the upcoming next, I would say really 3 to 5 years, is we want to add the real engagement along with an anytime virtual engagement. You're going to hear the word a lot mentioned about hybrid engagements and what does that hybrid engagement entail. And so that's what we're going to talk to you a little bit about today, is molding together a real-time virtual engagement with an anytime virtual engagement. Now, anytime is an asynchronous discussion. Now, for those of you who don't know what asynchronous means, and by the way, I didn't know what it was either until I went to work for Within3. Asynchronous is just an overtime discussion. It allows you to be able to ask questions over a longer period of time as opposed to just an hour or 2 or 3 hour long virtual call. And the engagement can be used across the entire platform of your business. So your sales teams, your HCPs, your physician advisory boards, researchers, clinical trials, compliance, training and education. So across the entire enterprise system, this virtual type of engagement can be used. So let me just talk really quick about what is a typical structure of a virtual hybrid session. And this is my opinion, but it can be used in many, many different ways. Now, the first type of a hybrid session is that we're going to include a webcast. It's going to be a short webcast to introduce everybody, people that are going to be participating in the discussion. We can talk about expectations. We can talk about, what the objectives of the overtime discussion is going to be. And after that quick webcast, then we're going to go ahead and launch our overtime discussion. Now, why overtime discussion? It provides greater insight into individual topics, and it provides greater participation. That's one of the biggest things. I don't know if many of you have noticed on your Zoom calls and things like that, is that you always get one or two people who kind of take over the call. Secondly, if you invite 10 people to a call and 8 of them show up, that's a huge success. And out of those 8 people, if 5 talk on a consistent basis, that's even a bigger success. But what we're looking for is 100% participation, which allows you to include more people in your discussion, more physicians, more key stakeholders, more payers, whoever it might be. And then secondly, to be able to get 100% participation in conjunction with greater insights into the topic you're discussing. Now, once your overtime discussion is coming to a close, say in a week or a 2-week period, we'll have another webcast in this hybrid virtual session. Then we'll talk a little bit about, what are some of the final tasks going to be? What are some of the things that we learned in this session? And we'll just have a kind of a quick wrap up. At that point in time, final deliverables will then be provided, whether it might be algorithms, documents, evidence-generated plan, publications, whatever it is that you are looking to accomplish within this overtime discussion. And then finally, you will sit down with someone and they'll talk about your back-end analytics. They'll talk a little bit more about, what took place within the room, what time people logged in, how long did they stay logged in for, what were their general, answers to questions, what was their word count per question. So a lot of back-end analytics are provided with an overtime discussion. So as you're looking at these hybrid sessions, there's just some deep things, there are some points that you need to kind of take a look at. What is going to be your virtual hybrid focus? Make sure you think about that. Should we use a webcast or a webinar, or can we just push this into an overtime discussion, or should we use both? And what's going to happen in the overtime discussion is a much deeper dive into the topics that you're looking to gain information on. And lastly, as we move forward now into 2021 and 22 and the years preceding, is how are we going to use both face-to-face discussions in conjunction with our overtime and our virtual learning? Because we are going to be using both. The pendulum will definitely swing from face-to-face meetings where we're all going to be wanting to get back out on the road, and eventually it will come back into these hybrid discussions where we will still see people once in a while, but a lot of the meetings will still take place on a virtual level. So what I would love to do now is to turn the time over to Jing Chen, my co-presenter today, to really talk about a case study that Medtronic was able to use with their respiratory group and their patient monitoring group based out of Boulder, and the success that they had with the sessions. And I call the overtime discussion is a session, and the success that they had with those. So Jing, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Kim. Hi, everybody. My name is Jane. I'm with Medtronic, and I'm very happy to be here today to share our experience on the virtual engagement with you. So back in November last year, we launched our very first overtime virtual advisory board session here at Medtronic with our HCP customers. So the virtual session lasted about 2 weeks, and we engaged a total of 19 physician advisors and 2 moderators from 3 different countries. So throughout the 2-week session, we also included a small amount of cross-functional internal stakeholders for observation. The objective of launching this overtime advisory board, virtual advisory board forum, was to identify and refine our marketing, and to be specific, market development strategy in our targeted region by obtaining in-depth clinical input and product feedback from our target HCP stakeholders. So we structured this session by providing a total of 28 open-ended questions. And we organized the questions into 5 different sections with distinct objectives for each section. And we rolled out those 5 sections one at a time throughout the course of 2 weeks, so our participants could stay focused on the topic one at a time during the discussions. So prior to the 2-week overtime virtual forum, we also conducted a virtual live introduction webcast call to introduce our participants to each other and review the session objectives, as well as to provide trainings on the virtual forum for them. And after the 2-week forum, we also conducted live wrap-up webcast sessions with our participants as well as with our internal stakeholders to discuss the results from the virtual discussions, as well as to collect the final thoughts and feedbacks on the relevant topics. So by the end of the session, we were not only able to meet our business objectives for this virtual forum, but we were also able to obtain very positive feedback from our participants regarding their virtual experience with their peers.
So, Jing, did you have any challenges that you were trying to overcome, things that weren't working for you prior to this that you hope that the overtime discussion would provide?
Yes. Yeah. So I would like to address the challenges that we were able to overcome through the virtual interaction, I guess, from two perspectives. The one is first of all, it's external challenges that we were facing, right? Due to, there was a lack of meaningful engagement actually with our HCP stakeholders and customers around the world, especially so during this pandemic, when most of the real life conferences were canceled and traveling, right, especially global traveling, was very limited. On the other hand, our HCP customers were also under a lot of pressure of increasing demand of taking care of their patients during this very difficult and trying time. So despite the fact that our customers and stakeholders may need us, more so than ever, and also to connect with their peers too during this difficult time, the restriction of traveling and meeting each other face to face posed a huge challenge for us as MedTech professionals to address, because our customers, because of the limited availability of our customers, and also because of the restrictions of the traveling. And also from the internal perspective, here at Medtronic, my responsibility as a global marketing professional is to build the market development strategy for our product in our target regions and countries. That needs a tremendous amount of communication and in-depth understanding of the local user landscape in order to make sure that we're aligned internally with our regions and countries' marketing stakeholders. And in order to achieve that, we had to accomplish many logistical challenges, such as arranging calls, right, across different time zones, multiple emails just for communication, and even sometimes language barriers are in place. So due to those challenges, there wasn't a very clear, I guess, market development strategy or a very clear understanding of the strategy for our product in our focus countries because of the lack of effective communication, as well as the lack of understanding of our targeted stakeholders. So both of the external and internal challenges that we're facing made us make a decision on seeking creative and also compliant and safe ways in the virtual environment to engage our stakeholders in order to achieve our objectives.
And Jing, had you ever used an overtime discussion type of platform in the past? Were there some question marks in your mind before you launched that first session as to whether or not it would work or not?
So we have never, to be honest with you, Kim, we've never used an overtime virtual interaction. We've used some webcast or VOC phone calls. But I think the overtime interaction, virtual interaction, that was actually our very first time. And to be honest with you, Kim, prior to us launching this virtual session, even within ourselves, we were wondering, would this work, right? Would our customers really like it? So we actually had a lot of questions and uncertainty before we launched this session.
And so what were some of the values and benefits that you got from this? After you conducted that first session, what were some things that were unexpected that you gained from the overtime discussion?
Yeah, so I guess the values of our very first virtual forum was, firstly, we were able to identify our marketing strategy, right, by obtaining the accurate clinical implications and product feedbacks from our target stakeholders. And the way our overtime virtual forum was set up allowed our customers to provide their feedback in a very thoughtful, organized, and robust way. And secondly, we were also able to engage our target stakeholders across various countries, right, during the same virtual session. So that saved us a lot of logistical arrangement efforts, considering the amount of physicians that we were engaging. There was a total of 20 physicians. And those are the time zone differences across the different countries, as well as our customers, schedule constraints, and not to mention the travel restrictions that are still in place until this day. So I guess those are definitely the key values and benefits that we were able to achieve or we were able to obtain from the virtual session. And also there were some, additional benefits that we were not expecting, actually, to be quite honest with you, but we were so glad to see. It was that because of the best practice sharing, right, and the very rich in-depth discussions on clinical practice of our technology, after the session, one of our physician participants even went back to their hospital and advocated for the technology we discussed over the virtual forum and ultimately improved their clinical and practice and patient safety. And also, there was another participant from the same virtual session. She actually signed up with us on the evaluation project on our technology because she was previously a non-user of the technology. But after the in-depth discussion with her peers under the moderation of our moderators, she started to realize the importance of using the technology to ensure patient safety. So she signed up with us to sign up for this evaluation project to further generate the evidence in that space in support of using the technology. So we were definitely very thrilled to see that the virtual interaction was not just a one-off collaboration, but we were able to kind of develop long-term sustainable collaboration with our key KOLs.
So you would say there's a definite measurable ROI in that overtime discussion.
I agree, yes.
Well, so a couple of the things that you just mentioned there that I kind of wanted to talk a little bit deeper about is number one, obviously cost savings. The ability to be able to talk with people virtually, to have an overtime discussion with people is a huge cost savings over bringing people in and putting them down in a conference room, having to pay their airfare, having to rent a hotel rooms for everybody, conference rooms. So a big cost savings there are available for that. Secondly, it gives you increased participation, the ability to actually have everybody in the room talk, have everybody in the room participate. So it also allows you to expand the diversity of your group. You can include more people around the globe, not just in a specific area or your specific few physicians that you're always reaching out to because you know they're going to give you valuable input. Now you can reach out to a larger group of people. You can include more people into your discussions because, again, we're looking for that 100% participation, which, again, gives you those even deeper insights into the topics that you're looking for. And lastly on this is the work-life balance. You mentioned how important time is to physicians. I know physicians would a lot rather be able to see multiple patients in an hour-long period than they would to sit on a webcast. And so being able to have that work-life balance, to enter into a discussion forum that they can do it at their time. They can do it at early in the morning. They can do it late at night after the kids are in bed. And secondly, it gives them a chance, Jing, and maybe you can expound on this a little bit. It gives them a chance to think about what they're going to say. I know that with your sessions, a lot of people came back and answered questions a second and third time because they had a chance to actually think about what they wanted to say. They come up with new thoughts and they were able to provide additional content. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Kim. So that was actually another thing that we were very glad to see when we were observing the conversation virtually. So, at the first, right, people are still trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to say? What am I going to answer? Even though we provided a well-structured question. But over time, as the session progressed, we started to realize and we started to see that the participants would actually go back and then kind of read through their notes or some documents. And when they came back the next day or a second time, they would start pulling in like publications, evidence, or some other documentations that they have to support their arguments. So it's almost a way to see that the conversations are getting richer and more in-depth, progressively as the time goes by. So it was definitely a great experience both for us to get the rich and in-depth discussions from our participants over time, as well as for the participants as well to exchange that very important information and rich discussions with their peers across different countries.
So, Jing, do you believe that the virtual engagement platform can be just as meaningful as an in-person discussion?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Kim. So I think in-person interactions are very important, right? Especially when it comes to building that emotional connection with your customers. However, I also believe that virtual engagement has its very unique strength and sometimes even more helpful and meaningful than the face-to-face interactions, especially in the business context, when you have a relatively complex business objective to achieve. and you are trying to engage multiple stakeholders at the same time. So I'm going to quote some of the post-session surveys and comments that we received from our participants for our first session. So one of the participants actually said, the virtual session allows interactions with my peers from different countries in an orderly and flexible way. And another participant said, I was able to change my practice at my hospital as a result after the session to improve patient safety. So thank you. And another one said, it was my first time participating in a virtual forum, and I have seen it very dynamic. I like it a lot, and I'd like to participate again. So having received those very positive feedbacks on the engagement and the experience from our customers, definitely, in such a constructive way, definitely reinforce our belief in bringing in the virtual engagement so we can continue to foster and enrich the customer relationship that we have with our stakeholders.
So do you also believe, though, that there's certain times that a virtual or a hybrid where you're using both, Zoom calls, webinars, Teams calls, whatever it might be, and using asynchronous in conjunction with that is important? Or do you believe there are multiple times where you can use two separate platforms and then times where you can mold them together?
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting question. So what we did for our very first session, like I discussed earlier, right? I also believe the importance of, real-time interactions. I do believe that there was an opportunity to build that emotional connection with each other. So what we did for the first session was that we actually combined the live elements of the webcast into our virtual session to create a sense of connection for our participants. So at the beginning, right, we launched this, introduction and training call with each other. So they knew each other. They knew that, once they went into the overtime virtual discussions, those were real people and real peers from other countries that they were talking to. And after the session, we also conducted real live webcast wrap-up calls with our stakeholders and also with our internal marketing partners as well. And I have to be honest with you, Kim, I've been in a lot of the customer-facing real life activities, but the end of the wrap-up calls with our customers and our internal stakeholders are one of the most productive conversations that I've ever had. Because over the course of the 2 weeks, during the rich and in-depth discussion, once we have that wrap-up calls, everybody was just ready to jump right in and discuss the key elements from the overtime discussion.
Fantastic. Well, last but not least, I know we're running down close to our end time here. I wanted to bring up a slide really quick and let you all see that this is not just based around a physician advisory board. I don't want anybody to ever think that the capabilities or the platforms of an asynchronous discussion is just for physicians. This can be used for Congress huddles. It can be used for documents and material reviews. It can be used internally as well as external. I was speaking with a client this morning, actually, who talks about using the platform for internal use as well and for internal stakeholders. MSL insights, publication planning, steering committees. We even had a client this year who used it for their Christmas party. So that's the first time we don't have a little slice of the pie for that one, but it was used for that as well. So again, the asynchronous discussion is really to the point of being able to not only push out information, but able to ask questions and gain knowledge on those specific topics, but in-depth knowledge, not just knowledge you would gain from a quick Zoom call or a quick webinar, but actual in-depth where people have a chance to think about and come back in and give their comments, think again, and be able to return and give additional comments as well. So last question for you, Jing, before we end here. What are your thoughts about the future of engaging with medical device global customers? Do you think that we're going to swing to the in-person meetings and have a lot of those, or do you think it's going to be kind of a middle ground where we'll have hybrid engagements and still a few face-to-face meetings coming up?
Yeah, I think that's another great question. And to me personally, I feel like it'll be the middle ground. There will be a well combination and very nice balance of both. And the reason is, to me personally, right, I believe the virtual engagement will be a part of our lives, both personally and more importantly, professionally. Even prior to the pandemic, there had always been the elements of virtual interactions in different forms and modalities. Because even if travel was unrestricted back then, it was still impossible to engage every single one of your customer in real life every single time due to how busy the modern lives are for both us and for our customers too. Plus the amount of logistics that you have to plan, and also the budget constraints sometimes that are in place. So the virtual engagement had always come in handy when it comes to stakeholder interactions. However, I also think that the situation of the pandemic, even though it's a terrible situation, but it really gives us, medtech professionals the opportunity to rethink how we can be more creative and engaging our customers by utilizing technology to maximize engagements with our stakeholders in a meaningful, secure, and compliant way. And it's not just happening in the medtech industry. With the pandemic and the staying at home, requirements for most part of the world, even our customers, our HCP stakeholders have been adopting different ways of using virtual platforms to interact with their patients. Many of the clinicians have started to adopt telemedicine to provide care for the patients. And many of our HCP customers will go to virtual conferences with their professional societies to interact with the peers globally. And we also engage our customers in many different other formats virtually, right? Such as the virtual simulation trainings. So our customers are getting more and more accepted and adaptive of the virtual environment and starting to see the real benefits of it, even probably more so than us do. So to me, it's almost without a question that engaging our stakeholders globally in the virtual environment will be here to stay, and there will be a nice combination in the near future that we're going to engage our customers both virtually and in real life.
Fantastic. Well, Jing, thank you so much for your time. And I want to tell everybody that's listening out there, thank you for listening today. As you begin to move forward and as you begin to put together your virtual engagement and your hybrid engagement platforms, be sure to think about what you're looking to accomplish. Be sure to include both the webinars and the webcasts in the real-time engagement, and then being able to add to that an overtime type of discussion, which allows a much deeper dive into the topics you're looking for information on. So again, I want to tell you all how much we appreciate your time. We will be around a little bit later in the discussion rooms to answer any questions you might have. And thank you very much.
Thank you.